She told me she always locks her door at midnight. So why did she leave it open when I knocked at 11? I remember the moment so clearly, as if her words had been etched into the air, lingering long after she'd spoken them. It wasn't a grand declaration, nothing dramatic or exaggerated, just a simple remark that seemed casual on the surface, but carried a weight I couldn't ignore. We were standing in her kitchen late in the evening, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only background sound. My friend had gone upstairs already, leaving me alone with his mother, a woman I'd known for years, but never quite like this. She was 43, poised in the way only someone who had lived and endured could be. There was a certain elegance about her that didn't come from fashion or effort. It came from how she carried herself, with calm confidence, with grace. She placed a mug into the sink, dried her hands slowly with a towel, and then looked toward the clock above the stove. "I always lock my door at midnight," she said, almost absently, as though she were speaking only to herself. But then she looked at me. It wasn't a long glance, just a second, maybe two, but there was something in her eyes that stopped me cold. Her tone had been soft, almost routine, but her gaze said something else entirely. It held me there, suspended between the ordinary and something I couldn't quite name. I gave a half smile, trying to play it off. "So, no late-night visitors?" I teased lightly, my voice steadier than I felt. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, though her eyes didn't waver. "Exactly," she said, her voice low-measured. Then she walked past me, her perfume, a subtle mix of vanilla and something floral, trailing behind her. For a brief second, as she brushed by, her shoulder almost touched mine, close enough that I felt the warmth of her presence without actual contact. And then she was gone, her footsteps fading up the stairs. But the sentence remained. "I always lock my door at midnight." I stood there in the kitchen far longer than I should have, staring at the dark window above the sink, replaying the moment again and again. Was it just a remark? A throwaway comment about her habits? Or had there been something more? Something in the way she held my gaze a little too long, the way her voice seemed to soften when she said it? The logical part of me told myself I was reading too much into it. She was my friend's mom. Older, wiser, untouchable. But another part, the restless, curious part, kept circling back. Why had she said it to me, and not just gone upstairs without a word? Why had her eyes searched mine, as if waiting to see what I'd do with the information? The kitchen felt strangely empty without her, yet filled with her presence all the same. I leaned against the counter, my palms warm, my chest tight, caught between sense and temptation. And in that moment, I realized something dangerous. Midnight wasn't just a time, it was a boundary. And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, I already want to cross it. The rest of the evening passed in fragments, but none of it seemed real. My friend and I had thrown on a movie, something we'd both seen a dozen times, but I couldn't recall a single scene. My mind was still in that kitchen, still caught in the shadow of her glance and the echo of her words. "I always lock my door at midnight." The line repeated itself in my head like the ticking of a clock. Every time I tried to focus on something else, dialogue from the TV, the buzz of my phone, even small talk with my friend, it pulled me back again. By 10, the movie had ended, and my friend, clearly exhausted, disappeared upstairs. I was left alone in the dim living room, the glow of the TV screen casting pale light across the walls. Silence crept in, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional groan of the old house settling. It was the kind of quiet that made your thoughts louder, sharper, impossible to push aside. I leaned back on the couch, fingers drumming against my knee, restless energy buzzing through me. My chest felt tight, my mind caught between two truths. One, that I should forget about it. Two, that I couldn't. Every detail of her returned to me unbidden. The way she dried her hands with that towel, slow and deliberate, as though there was meaning even in small movements. The faint perfume that had lingered when she passed me, warm and sweet, but never overpowering. And most of all, her eyes, calm, steady, holding mine for just a moment too long. Was it my imagination? Maybe. But if it was, why did it feel so real? I got up, pacing the room, the floorboards cool beneath my bare feet. The window near the front door framed the night outside, a wash of silver light from the street lamp falling across the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then fell silent again. The whole neighborhood seemed wrapped in sleep, except for me. I checked the time, 10:24. Each minute felt like it stretched longer than the last. My heart raced at the thought of knocking on her door before midnight. What if she had meant nothing by it, and I showed up like a fool? What if she was waiting, expecting me, and I stayed here, paralyzed by doubt? I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling hard. The rational part of me screamed to forget it, to go upstairs, close my eyes, and let the night pass like any other. But the pull was stronger. That single sentence had become a thread, tugging at me, unraveling my self-control. By 10:40, I was already putting on my hoodie, my steps light on the creaking wood floor. Every sound felt amplified. The rustle of fabric, the shift of the latch as I opened the back door, the chill air rushing in. I slipped outside, the night air cool and damp with the faint smell of rain that had fallen earlier. My breath rose in faint clouds, my pulse thudding in my ears. By the time I glanced at my watch again, it was 10:53. And with each step I took toward her side of the house, the weight of what I was about to do grew heavier. I wasn't sure what waited for me, but I knew I couldn't turn back. The walk to her door felt longer than it should have. Each step on the damp grass seemed louder than the last, as though the whole world was listening. The air was cool and heavy after the evening rain, carrying that earthy scent of wet soil and leaves. My hands were shoved into the pockets of my hoodie, but they weren't steady. My pulse thumped through my fingertips, quick and uneven. Her side of the house looked different at night. A soft glow seeped through the living room curtains, warm and golden against the darkness. Every other window in the neighborhood had gone black, but hers stayed lit like a beacon. It made me wonder if she was awake because of me or despite me. I stopped at the bottom of her porch steps, glancing back once toward the main house. The silence there was reassuring, but also heavy, reminding me of the risk. If my friend ever found out, I shoved the thought away. This wasn't about him. This was about her, and the words she'd spoken still echoing in my mind. Midnight was a line. 11 was a choice. Slowly, I climbed the steps. The wood creaked faintly under my weight, and I froze, listening for any sound from inside. None came. My hand hovered in the air, knuckles inches from the door. The weight of hesitation pressed on me. What if she opened it and sent me away? What if she didn't open it at all? I swallowed hard and finally knocked. 3 soft taps. The sound felt enormous in the quiet night. I pulled back, waiting, every second stretching. My heartbeat grew louder, as if it were trying to drown out the silence. Then movement, shadows shifting against the glow of the curtains. My breath caught as I saw her figure approach. Her steps were unhurried, deliberate, like she had already known I would come. The lock clicked, the handle turned, and the door opened just enough for her face to appear. She wasn't startled. She wasn't confused. She was composed, as though she'd expected me. She wore a silk robe, pale cream in color, tied loosely at her waist. Her hair fell freely over her shoulders, framing her face in the warm lamplight behind her. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. Her eyes found mine, calm yet questioning, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. She didn't ask why I was there. She didn't remind me that it wasn't midnight yet. She simply tilted her head slightly, a subtle gesture, neither a welcome nor a rejection. The world seemed to narrow to that single moment. The faint scent of her perfume drifting through the doorway, the golden light wrapping around her like an aura, the silence stretching between us. My chest felt tight, my throat dry, but my legs moved anyway. I stepped forward. Crossing the threshold felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. The air inside was warmer, tinged with tea and faint candle wax. She closed the door behind me without a word, the click of the lock sealing the moment like a secret. And in that silence, I knew the night had only just begun. The living room felt different than it had earlier that day. At night, with only a single lamp glowing in the corner, it was softer, more intimate, as if the space itself had shed its daytime formality. Shadows stretched gently across the walls, while the golden light pooled around the two of us like a private circle no one else could enter. She motioned for me to sit, and I lowered myself onto the couch. The fabric was warm, holding the faint trace of her perfume. She disappeared into the kitchen for a moment, the sound of cabinets and the clink of cups drifting back. My nerves buzzed with every second of her absence, but when she returned carrying a small tray with tea, my chest loosened just slightly. She set the tray on the coffee table, her movements calm, almost ritualistic. As she poured, I noticed the steadiness of her hands, the way the steam curled around her wrist. She handed me a cup, and, for a second, our fingers touched. It wasn't deliberate, not exactly, but the contact lingered, sending a quiet warmth up my arm. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice low, soft enough that it felt meant only for me. I took a sip of the tea, its heat grounding me. Something like that, I admitted, though we both knew it was only part of the truth. Her lips curved into a small smile, not playful, but knowing. She leaned back against the couch, robe folding neatly at her side, and let out a quiet breath. "Sometimes the night makes it hard to rest," she said. "Too many thoughts get louder when everything else is quiet." Her words struck me because they felt like a confession, gentle, indirect, but still real. For the first time, I noticed the faint tiredness in her eyes, the subtle weight she carried that wasn't visible in the daytime. I nodded, setting the cup down carefully. "Yeah, it's like the silence doesn't let you hide from what's in your head." She turned her face toward me then, and the way her gaze lingered told me I hadn't just been imagining it earlier. Something passed between us in that silence. Recognition, maybe of two people who weren't supposed to meet in this space, but somehow had. The conversation shifted, drifting between small things and deeper truths. We talked about books she loved, about music that used to play in her house when she was younger. She asked me about my plans, my restlessness, my search for something undefined. There was no rush, no forced rhythm, just the kind of talk that grows when two people allow themselves to be unguarded. At one point, she laughed softly at something I said, and I caught the way the lines at the edges of her smile deepened. They weren't flaws. They were maps of a life fully lived, and somehow that made her more beautiful. The distance between us shrank without either of us deciding it. By the time her laughter faded, our knees were almost touching. I felt the heat radiating from her body, subtle but magnetic. I wanted to reach for her hand, but instead I stayed still, letting the moment breathe. She glanced down at our closeness, then back into my eyes, her expression unreadable yet not cold. The tea grew cooler on the table, but the air between us grew warmer, thicker, charged with something fragile and undeniable. And for the first time that night, I stopped doubting. The clock on the mantel ticked with steady patience, its hands drawing closer to 12. Each second seemed louder in the quiet of that room, as though time itself was leaning in to listen. I tried not to stare at it, but I couldn't help glancing every so often, watching the minute hand inch toward the line that separated day from night. She sat across from me at first, one leg tucked under the other, her robe folding easily around her. But over the course of our conversation, we drifted closer, first shifting toward the center of the couch, then leaning forward when we spoke until somehow we were side by side. Our knees brushed when one of us shifted, subtle sparks of contact that neither of us acknowledged but neither of us pulled away from. She reached for the blanket draped over the arm of the couch and spread it lightly across her lap. Then, without a word, she adjusted it so it covered my legs as well. The gesture was small, but it felt enormous, an unspoken invitation into her warmth. "Are you warm enough?" she asked, her tone soft but carrying something more than politeness. "Yeah," I said quietly, my throat tight. "More than enough." Her lips curved faintly, though her eyes remained on the clock. I followed her gaze, the minute hand now at 11:47. A ripple of unease went through me. Not fear, exactly, but a heightened awareness that midnight was approaching, and with it, whatever meaning her words had carried. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. The air between us was filled with the soft rhythm of our breathing, the faint hiss of the radiator, the muted tick of the clock. She leaned back against the couch, her shoulder brushing mine. This time she didn't move away. Neither did I. The closeness was intoxicating. I could smell the faint vanilla of her perfume, feel the warmth of her arm against mine, hear the way her breaths sometimes caught when the silence lingered too long. Every sense was heightened, pulling me deeper into the moment. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the weight of words felt dangerous. One wrong phrase might break the fragile balance we were holding. So I stayed quiet, letting the silence do the talking. Her hand shifted, resting on the couch cushion between us. My fingers twitched, wanting to close the gap. I wondered if she was waiting for me to. I wondered if she felt the same pull that was consuming me. The clock ticked again. 11:53. She turned to look at me, her eyes steady but unreadable. There was no fear there, only a quiet intensity that made my chest tighten. For a heartbeat, it felt as though she were giving me permission without saying a word. But still, neither of us moved. By 11:58, the tension had grown unbearable. The line between us, once wide, then narrow, was now nearly invisible. One more glance, one more breath, and it would disappear completely. I realized then that midnight wasn't just a boundary for her. It was a choice for both of us, and we were standing right on the edge of it. The final seconds before midnight stretched like hours. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, each movement loud in the quiet room. I couldn't take my eyes off it, the black hands gliding slowly toward 12. My chest rose and fell too quickly, and though the blanket draped over us was warm, a shiver worked its way through me. She was still beside me, still calm, though I noticed the way her fingers rested lightly on the fabric of the couch, as though she too was bracing for something. Her robe had slipped slightly at the shoulder, revealing the smooth curve of skin. She didn't adjust it. Instead, she turned her face toward me, her eyes catching mine in the low amber light. The final tick came. Midnight. The clock struck softly, 1, then 2 chimes, echoing into the silence. I half expected her to stand, to walk to the door, to follow the very rule she had given voice to earlier. But she didn't move. Instead, her lips parted just slightly, and in a whisper that trembled more with meaning than with volume, she said, "It's midnight." Those 2 words carried weight. They weren't a warning this time. They were a statement, almost a confession. And then, slowly, her hand shifted, sliding until it rested lightly on mine. Her touch was delicate, tentative, but it shattered the silence more than words ever could. My breath caught, the warmth of her skin flooding through me. For a moment I thought I might have imagined it, that she would pull away, but she didn't. I turned my hand, letting my fingers graze against hers. The simple contact felt electric, every nerve awake. My thumb brushed lightly along the back of her hand, tracing the faint rise of her knuckles. She inhaled softly at the touch, her composure faltering just enough for me to see the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. She began, her voice low, but the words trailed off. "You don't have to," I said quietly, surprising myself with how certain my voice sounded. Her eyes softened, and in them I saw the conflict, the lines of responsibility, propriety, and restraint battling against something far more human. For a moment, I thought she would pull back. Instead, she exhaled slowly and leaned just slightly closer, her shoulder pressing into mine. The sound of the clock faded behind the rhythm of our breathing. The air felt thick, charged, like the room itself was holding its breath with us. Neither of us said anything else. We didn't need to. The choice had already been made, silently, without ceremony. Midnight had come, and instead of closing the door, she had opened something far more fragile, far more dangerous, herself. Her head tilted slightly, resting near my shoulder, her cheek brushing against the fabric of my hoodie. The softness of the gesture, the quiet trust in it, hit me harder than anything else could have. I lowered my hand over hers fully now, enveloping it, grounding her as much as she was grounding me. And in that stillness, I realized midnight wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The clock had long passed midnight, but neither of us seemed to notice anymore. The line she had drawn with her words earlier was gone, replaced by a new, unspoken understanding. We sat together on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket, her hand resting in mine as if it had always belonged there. She hadn't pulled away. That fact alone meant more than I could express. Her silence wasn't avoidance, it was acceptance. The woman who had once spoken of locked doors now sat beside me, her shoulder pressed into mine, her breathing steady, trusting me with a closeness I had only dared imagine hours before. The room was hushed, bathed in the warm glow of the lamp. The steam from our forgotten tea had faded, leaving only the faint vanilla of her perfume in the air. I could feel the gentle rhythm of her heartbeat through her hand, a soft counterpoint to the ticking clock in the background. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "You shouldn't be here," she said, though there was no conviction in the words, only hesitation. "I know," I admitted softly, "but I'm glad I am." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, weary yet warm. "You're too young to understand what this means," she murmured, more to herself than to me. But as she said it, her thumb brushed lightly over my hand, betraying the truth her words tried to hide. She wasn't pushing me away. She was holding on. I shifted slightly, turning toward her. "Maybe," I said gently, "but I understand how I feel. And right now, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." For a moment, she searched my face, as if trying to find the boy she expected, but seeing instead the man sitting before her. Whatever she saw seemed to soften her expression, to ease the tension in her shoulders. She leaned her head lightly against my chest, her cheek resting just below my collarbone. The weight of it was delicate but grounding, as if she was allowing herself to surrender a part of her guard. My arm wrapped around her naturally, pulling her closer, and for the first time that night, I felt her completely relax into me. There was no need for more words. The intimacy wasn't in declarations or promises. It was in the stillness, the way her breath matched mine, the way our bodies fit quietly together in that narrow space on the couch. The clock continued to tick, but its meaning had changed. Midnight was no longer a barrier, no longer a rule. It was simply a time. And time, I realized, didn't matter as much as this closeness, this unspoken bond, this fragile but undeniable connection between us. Eventually, her voice returned, softer now, almost a whisper. "Just don't make me regret this." I tightened my hold around her, my cheek brushing lightly against her hair. "I won't," I promised, the certainty in my voice surprising even me. The night pressed on outside, silent and unbothered. But in that small living room, with her resting against me and my heart beating fast enough for both of us, it felt like the world had narrowed to just us two. And as her eyes finally drifted closed, I knew that what began with a locked door had opened into something neither of us had expected, but both of us wanted. If you enjoyed this story and want more slow burn romance tales like this one, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with someone who loves a good love story, and subscribe for more. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. It means more than you know. And until next time, may your nights be warm and your doors open to the right hearts.